Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to UDL in Collaborative Classroom, All Means All session. This is Mamta Verma. I work as a special education instructional facilitator for the district in BISD. Today, we will be talking about the UDL framework journey in our district, how we started and how we are moving forward with the UDL framework in the inclusive environment. Before we get started, let me briefly share the story behind it. When COVID 19 hit in March 2020, we were looking for the ways to include all learners, to engage all learners in the virtual setting. So we came across UDL framework where we decided to provide PD to our teachers in the UDL framework. That summer, we organized a book study. The book was 100 Ways Teach All Learners by Whitney Hab. We completed in two summers and it was introduced through Google Classroom. We added multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of assessment in that summer book study. There's a lot of flexibility were also provided when you it was introduced through Google Classroom. And as a result, we observed that we started observing the UDL framework in the classroom. Teachers were providing flexibility and offering options in the classroom. Meanwhile, we came across with a Region 4, and Region 4 offered us collaboration for piloting two of our campuses to introduce UDL framework. And we are planning to have more campuses under Region 4 now. And this is how our journey with UDL framework started in the inclusive environment. So in next slides, we will talk more about it, how we started and how we are introducing UDL framework across the district. So here are a few guiding questions when we discuss UDL framework with our teachers. How can co-teachers proactively address barriers to engagement, representation, assessment in collaborative classrooms? What co-teaching approaches and UDL approaches can be used during collaborative planning? How can general and special education teachers use the UDL framework in the collaborative classroom? So these are the guiding questions to create training in a UDL framework in the district. Before I move into the presentation, I just want to show you the note pages, note-taking guide. Uh, I want everyone to open this. In this note-taking guide, we have on the top, it's a recording link and then QR code. Then we have handouts, link, and QR code. Although this is a pre-recorded session, but we have interactive activities in this presentation. So this is a Padlet link. This is Google Jamboard, and the activity 3 has a Google Jamboard. As we reach to that part of the presentation, we will ask you to open these links and we will take you to this document. So keep this document handy. Now, we are going to write a definition of inclusive education. And we have given you choices. You can visualize, you can draw, you can record a video of yourself, You can record an audio or you can Google search an image of what is your definition of inclusive education. And here are the optional sentence starter if you're going to type. When I visualize inclusive education, I picture students or I hear students, what the teachers are doing in the classroom, how the learning spaces look like, or how you see every students are engaged and included in the classroom. So now we are going to go back in the notes section and you will open the Padlet link. Here are a few examples. Now you can add your response here. You can pause the video. Once you answer the question, you can resume the video. I hope you completed the activity and you enjoyed by using the multiple means of choices in expression. Now let's go to the next slide. So, what is universal design for learning? The universal design for learning is has three brain networks. When we design inclusive instruction, it always takes intentional planning and collaboration. The big question comes how to support educators to design learning experiences that are inclusive for each and every learner. As a special education instruction specialist, part of my job is to help teachers to plan instruction collaboratively so all the students, whether they are identified or not identified, or they are accessing the general education curriculum. When the student with learning differences are placed in the general education classrooms, they often receive accommodations and services. However, when these accommodations are paired with and constrained by traditional and rigid curriculum, the result cannot be the same in my experience. So, the UDL framework, the studies of the brain, confirm that the three brain networks are active during learning. Those are affective network, recognition network, and strategic network. Effective network is why of learning, and recognition network is what of learning, and strategic network is how of learning. Effective network is responsible to stimulate interest and motivation for learning. Recognition network is present information and content in a different way. And strategic network provides opportunity to differentiate the ways that student can express what they know. Before we dig deeper, we should understand that how the brain networks and universal design for learning work. When the brain receives sensory information, such as what we see, what we hear, it is received in the back of the brain, including the occipital and temporal lobes of the brain. And that is known as recognition network. That is what of learning that aligns with perception, language, symbols, comprehension, also known as representation network. When the information is processed and relayed for meaning to the center of the brain, that is known as affective network, which is why of learning, which aligns with interest, effort, persistence, and self regulation, also known as engagement network. When information is organized in the frontal lobe for response or action, that is known as strategic network. The how of learning that aligns with physical action, expression, communication, and executive function, also known as action and expression. So these three broad learning networks can be helpful when we design learning experiences. So we should always asking those questions. What am I learning? Learning intentions, engagement network. Why am I learning? Relevance. How will I know I learned it? Success criteria. So these are three brain networks should be kept in the mind when we are thinking about planning in the collaborative environment. Now the question comes, how can co-teachers proactively address barriers related to engagement, representation, assessment in inclusive classrooms? Now we are going to talk about some barriers, how we can address those barriers proactively, intentionally during the planning of instruction. What are the engagement barriers? What if the student do not understand the purpose of lesson? When assignment is too easy or difficult. Assignment has no value in their life. Lack of self-regulation skills. Subject matter is irrelevant or boring. When the student lacks background knowledge. This is what happens. The student will not engage into the learning process. Recognition barriers. That is the first step of learning. What if the student have hearing impairment? What if poor vision, attention issues, memory issues, processing speed issues, lack of background knowledge, language is not their first language. I am not a native English speaker, I am a multilingual. So I can understand when the language, when the person has to transfer from one language to another language, it takes longer processing time. Sometimes we miss the important points. So that point needs to be considered if we are teaching a person with processing speed issue or we teaching the student who is not a native language learner. Strategic barriers. Strategic barriers are when the student do not have a sharpened pencil or do not have charged laptop or student have poor motor skills, poor handwriting and keyboarding skills, spelling and grammar issues, expressive communication issues. So these are some barriers in the learning processes. Besides that, apart from that, the curriculum barriers, because curriculum is rigid, the teacher needs to adapt, the teacher needs to scaffold in order to reach out to all learners in the classroom. What the adult barriers in the collaborative classroom where there are two adults? One is a content specialist, another is a strategy specialist. If they do not get along, how it's going to impact the learning process? Student barriers, we already talked about it. So these are some barriers we need to address proactively in order to proactively plan, intentionally plan a learning process in the inclusive environment. Now let's talk about it. Now let's talk about it. What co-teaching approaches and UDL approaches can be used during collaborative planning? So this is also an important question. When there are two adults in the classroom, they use some kind of co-teaching approaches or what UDL approaches they would like to use. Let me give you a scenario. When a special education teacher goes in the classroom to teach students, she didn't get opportunity to co-plan with the teacher. She does not know what approaches, what UDL approaches the teacher is going to use. So how it's going to impact the learning processes. How we can address this proactively. Metaphorically, the co-teachers are just like pilots to navigate through the design process collaboratively, in which they anticipate and overcome barriers for their passengers who are students to ensure meaningful journey or learning experiences. So, this is when the two teachers are in the classroom, they have to proactively navigate the design process to anticipate and overcome barriers for their passengers. Now, the question comes, why should we provide co teaching? Right? The research has shown when the co teaching is being provided when two adults are in the classrooms, gaps are begin to close. Students gain a bit more than a year's progress within a school year. Students get access to general education, intensive targeted instruction at the same time. They receive in class support with common intervention in the classroom. So, now what are the six co teaching approaches? As per Marlin Friend, the six approaches are teaming, parallel teaching, station teaching, one teach, one assist, alternative teaching, one teach, one observe. Now, the question is, in the parallel teaching, the teachers divide the class and teach the same information. In teaming, the two teachers they teach the same content together. Station teaching, the teacher divide the content and students circulate to the station to work with each teacher and or specific areas. One teach, one assist. One teacher teach primarily and other teachers circulate to assist student as needed. In alternative teaching, one teacher works with a large group, whereas the other teacher works with a small group, maybe providing like intensive intervention. One teach, one observe. During this approach, one teacher teaches the whole group and another teacher move around and take the data during the instruction and both teachers discusses the data to make informed decision about the instruction. Now the question comes, how can general and special education teachers use the UDL framework in the collaborative classrooms? Now we know the benefits of co-teaching. Now we know the six co-teaching models. When the both teachers will not co-plan collaboratively, intentionally, proactively, how would they know what UDL framework approach they will use during the lesson? So in next few slides, we are going to talk about how we can use UDL framework approach in the collaborative, in the inclusive classroom. Now here are some questions. How do we engage learners? What of learning to understand why of learning? And studies has proven that the collaborative setting is the best environment where brain-based learning can be easily implemented because there are two adults to meet the need of all learners, right? So how of learning? What of learning, engagement piece, and why of learning. And when the two adults are there, it is easily, proactively, intentionally implement the UDL framework in the inclusive environment. For co-teachers to have, for co-teachers to have another adult is always provide a edge to create a learning environment that will be beneficial for our students. Now let's talk about UDL and collaborative planning. UDL offers multiple means of opportunity in learning environment. Thus, it provides equity and inclusion. And how intentional co-planning promote access to all in engagement, representation, and assessment. For co teachers to have knowledge of skills to co plan, co instruct, and co assess, there are some foundational particulars and contextual factors that must be in the place. It is essential for administrators to help to set the stage for school wide adoption of co teaching. In order to create foundation of successful collaboration between general education and special education teachers, the teacher should be provided professional development on what co-teaching is and what co-teaching approaches are and how they can help to use those co-teach approaches to benefit the learners, the co-planning to teach together. So the administrators need to provide co-planning time together for the both teachers so they can meet regularly ongoingly to go over the lesson planning, how they are going to address the engagement barriers, how they are going to address the representation barriers, how they are going to address the assessment barriers. By looking at the student barriers, curriculum barriers, and also looking at the barriers that are inhibiting teaching those lessons in the inclusive setting. Before we move further, we need to understand that the both teacher should understand and our administrator need to understand co-teaching is not one teacher teaching all subjects or one person teaching while the other makes materials or grade the student work, or one person teaching the lesson while the other sits, stands, watches without function or assignment, or pulling a student out of the room to a special education setting. One person teaching all the general education students and one person supporting all the SPED students. This is a resource setting in the inclusive environment, and or one person acting as a tutor. So both teachers should understand the co-teaching is not in the inclusive classroom. Both teachers work as a team. They have equal responsibility in the classroom. Now let's talk about it when we are introducing how the affective network, the UDL guidelines, and what examples of co-teaching models we will use. As we know, under the affective network, it supports engagement so learners remain motivated throughout the learning process. So here are the UDL guidelines, the level of thinking, level of challenge, offer various options and guides to learners to self-regulate. So these are the guidelines. When we plan, we need to make sure that we should be providing these options to the learners. And what models would be best for that? Station teaching enables teachers to provide choice to student. I've seen in the classroom where the teacher uh, projected on the board the station teaching. When the student moved to the station teaching, the teacher gave student choices so they can choose the order of stations, which station they want to choose. The student will choose station A, station B, station C, or they can start with station C, B, or A, because the teacher is giving them flexibility to in order to choose the choices. If the students are given the choices, how is going to happen to the engagement? That is going to support their engagement. They will remain motivated and engaged throughout the learning process. Then the teaming. Teaming support the process of thinking that needed to master learning skills because two teachers are there. They have different learning styles. When the two teachers have different learning styles, if a student does not understand with one teacher, when the second teacher rephrases the same question or same answer, the student easily understand. When the two teacher state the same lesson objective, in a two different way the student is going to able to understand. So this addresses the affective network in the inclusive environment. Now let's look at the recognition network. The recognition network strategies that support what of learning. So learners may recognize the information being taught. The UDL guidelines are provide multiple examples like outlining, highlighting key information, including options for recognition through multimedia and other formats. And the examples of co-teaching models are station teaching, parallel teaching. Like I gave in the last slide, station teaching. The station teaching and parallel teaching allows option for each teacher to present information in diverse way while keeping the same objective and high standards. The strategic network, the strategies that support the learning process, the learner understand how to learn. So the UDL guidelines are provide options for strategic thinking, organizing of information, provide ongoing, immediate, and relevant feedback that is relevant to the learning, provide flexible opportunities to practice skills. So, example of co-teaching models are for strategic network are station teaching and parallel teaching. Station and parallel teaching allows the both teacher to provide options for strategic thinking and ongoing feedback. The occasional one teach one assist allows teachers to provide student with immediate relevant feedback as one teacher focuses on instruction and other assesses and evaluates the student performance. Teaming can provide the option for one teacher to present the content while the other teacher to focus on the process of note taking. And the occasional alternative teaching can focus on one teacher pulling a small group to review a concept while other teacher is teaching a whole group. Is it not amazing? We can all use the all three brain networks and use the UDL guidelines by adding those co-teaching models to teach those UDL guidelines. Now, the question is the UDL, multiple means of engagement and co-planning. Now, the question comes when we co-plan, this is the foremost important question. Are we addressing learner variability when we are planning the learning process? Are these barriers for use any student in material we are using? What material and media can we incorporate to give student options? So these are the questions when we start co-planning. So these are the three major questions we need to ask. Now let's talk about the learner variability. When we look at this fingerprint, what do we see? We see unique, we see variable, we see distinct, we see different, diverse, dissimilar. That is why it is so unlikely anyone has the same fingerprints as you, about a 1 in 64 billion chance. Is it not amazing? When each fingerprint is not identical, then why the students offered one size fits all approach? There is an average brain that can be instructed with the approach one size fits all, like fingerprints. No two brains are alike. Each brain is complex, interconnected web that is sculpted and influenced by genetics and interactions with the environment. Even twins are not alike. Now let's think about we have a 20 student in the classroom. How do you plan an engaging lesson for those students? Are all the learners learning at the same pace? Do they have the same learning style? Or do they have unique needs? Are there any ELL learners? Or do they have some kind of identified labels? Each brain differs. What about the gifted and talented learners in the classroom? Like my own example, being an ELL learner, ELL learners may take extra processing time. Students with labels may have short term memory issues or long term retrieval issues. ADHD students may have attention issues, or the student who are advanced, they have their own different issues. Let's think about it, all the learner variability while we are planning the lesson. I would like to give you an example. Let's say in the classroom, if I bring like a shirt, like a small size for everybody, right? In the classroom. Some students, they're average build, and some student, they are, they may need XL size. They may need 2XL size, right? They're big build. So can a small size fit all learners? Just think about it. The variability. Because everybody has a variability in their sizes. So each student need their own sizes to fit in. Similarly, learner variability is an important point to consider when the planning learning process. Now the next question comes UDL, multiple means of representation and co-instruct. Here are some questions we need to think about it. How and when can we provide flexible options during instruction that all learners can benefit from? What options should we include to ensure that students with IEP have the necessary modifications and accommodations? Should we provide these accommodations to all learners? Should we provide any of these options to all students or few students? Which co-teaching approaches should we use as we co-instruct the lesson? Which approach best supports the teaching and learning activities for the lesson? So these are also important questions to consider when we are planning about learner variability, co-planning, and when we are co-teaching. So these questions need to be considered. How are you going to teach those lessons? UDL, multiple means of action and expression and co-assess. Now here are a few questions about how can we use formative assessments that allow students to demonstrate knowledge in various ways? Are we using ongoing assessments? Or are we using at the end of the lesson? How can we incorporate scaffolds that help students learn the content and skills for the summative assessments? And how can we design assessment that reduce barriers while demonstrating knowledge and skills? So these are some questions when we're thinking about the assessment part. Now, I just want you to pause and reflect for yourself. If you're watching by yourself, just pause the video and reflect. If you're sitting with a partner together, just talk to your partner. Why should we use UDL framework in collaborative inclusive classroom? You can pause the video, and once you are done, you can resume the video. Now we are coming to the four components of UDL curricular design. Now we will talk about it. What are the components of UDL lesson design? So there are four components: goals, assessments, methods, and materials. When we plan a UDL lesson, we should start with the goals. Then we do backward planning. We think about the assessment. Then we think about the methods and we think about the materials. Now, in the next slides, we are going to unfold how we are going to address these four components of UDL lesson. Okay, it's a summertime. Everybody is already planned summer vacation or planning to go somewhere. Let's think about it. What is our goal for our vacation? And how we are going to assess our vacation, whether we achieved our goal, what methods we are going to use, how to get there, what materials do we need in order to enjoy our vacation. When we plan a vacation, what do? We start thinking about it. Where do we want to go? Why do we want to go? It's a recreation, family trip, or we are going to adventure trip, or we are going to a Disney World like adventure park, or when we are going to go, right? The time frame and who are going with us. Learner variability. Are the little kids are going with us? Infants or toddlers or teenagers or couples are going or the old people who have special needs, they are going with you, your parents. So, what barriers do you anticipate? After going through all these one, two, three, four, you will think about it. Okay, where I'm planning to go, what barriers do I anticipate? If I'm going to sea, what barriers do I anticipate? How I'm going? Am I flying? Am I taking an RV? Am I driving a car? So you think about it. What anticipated barriers do I'm gonna face if my tires get flat? I need insurance. Am I driving nighttime? Where I'm gonna live, right? Whether I'm living in a motel, RV, five-star hotel, resort, we all think. And how much money do I need? And what are the needs? If the infant is going, the meals, right? Clothing, materials, the budgeting. So you will proactively plan the solution to those barriers. What happen if the tire will fall flat? What happen if somebody will get sick? What happen if it rains? So these are some solutions you starting it proactively to make sure that your goal of vacation is achievable, enjoyable. Now I want you to go back to your the note section. Now you're going to click on planning activity 2. When you open up planning, now let's plan a vacation. So what thoughts come to your mind when you plan a vacation? You can use a sticky note or you can use a text box. Start typing here. After typing here, then look at these questions. How would you get there? What materials do you need to travel? What are the anticipated barriers? So these are some questions. If you think you have another barrier or any question, you can add it here by adding the sticky note or the text box. You can pause the video and resume as you complete. Now, we are going to plan the academic lesson together. Now, you guys have noticed that planning a vacation, planning a lesson, they have similar things. They both have goals, the backward planning assessments, methods, and materials. So, we are going to talk about how the academic UDL lesson is planned for the inclusive classroom. So, here is the standard, and this is adapted from a secondary lesson design barrier and solutions. Okay, so I am going to take you back to this at the bottom of it because this lesson is adapted from this lesson. Here is the lesson. I added the link and QR code. This has been adapted from IRIS Center, Peabody College. So this is a secondary lesson, but we are working on the elementary lesson. So this is for your reference. If you want to look at it, you can look at it. So here is the standard. The student recognizes, analyze genre-specific characteristic structures and purposes within and across increasingly complex, traditional, contemporary, classical, diverse text. So TEEX, this is the TEEX number. So now this is the standard. Now we'll start writing our objective. So if we write a traditional goal, the students are expected to recognize central ideas with supporting evidence in the textbook. When we have this goal, what are the anticipated barriers to representation network when we are planning this goal? And what are anticipated barriers to action and expression network when planning these goals? So here are some barriers. If we are using the traditional goal, the representation barrier because we have printed text. Some students with certain visual impairments and certain physical disabilities may have difficulty accessing information. Some students may struggle with decoding text. Action and expression barriers. Finding central idea with supporting evidence. Some students may have difficulty with handwriting while expressing themselves. Some students may have executive functioning issues. They may not able to effectively organize their thoughts and put them on the paper. So these are some barriers when we're trying to teach the traditional goal. Now, let's create a flexible goal, the UDL goal, which is flexible. The traditional goal was constructive goal. The student will be able to identify the central ideas with supporting details within a text in the graphic organizers. Do you think when we have a UDL goal, the student will not face a barrier? They may, right? They may. Now we need to even think about it when we have the UDL goal. What are the anticipated barriers to representation network and action and expression network? Even though it's a flexible goal, but the student will still require to learn how to identify the main idea with supporting details. But they will have supports. They will have audiobooks, digital text, internet, and video that will support them to identify the main idea if they have issues with the printed text. Action and expression barriers. The student will still need to demonstrate what they have learned about main idea with supporting details, but they now have options for doing it. For example, answering the questions by using speech to text, or making a video, or creating a digital presentation, or they can draw. Now, what assessments, when we are using this goal, what assessment would you use? And what are the anticipated barriers to use these assessments and how assessments are going to impact learner variability? Because we have learner variability in the classroom, right? We thought about it. ELL learners, student with labels, or student with dyslexia. So, what flexible opportunities will we provide for student due to learner variability to demonstrate the knowledge? These are the questions we need to consider while creating assessment, multiple means of action and expression. So, in traditional assessment, we will provide worksheets, chapter review exercise, unit test, class notes, choice, multiple choice questions, exit ticket, or oral presentation. The learner variability impact the student has to rely on printed text. They have to visually perceive, decode and comprehend written text, process visual information, organize thoughts. How can we provide the flexible opportunities to demonstrate knowledge? We can provide choice of paper or digital version, choice of format, medium of presentation, choice of grouping, individual, pair, small group, or assess through rubrics, choice in note taking format, graphic organizer, blog, visual note taking, and text to speech. So here we have UDL solutions to address learner variability in assessment. Now let's look at methods. What instructional methods would we use to teach the lesson? What potential barriers do we anticipate? And what are the solutions to the barriers? In the traditional, the student will learn independently by reading the textbook, or during the classroom lecture, the teacher will summarize the information, or whole group instruction, the teacher might show them short video, then facilitate. So, how the learner variability will impact? How the student is going to understand the content when they do not have the background information or cultural experiences? How the student is going to learn the limited example in the textbook? How the student is going to identify key ideas? How can a student with physically and cognitively issues they take the notes? What are some solutions we can provide? We can build or activate knowledge by asking related experiences during the whole group instruction, pre-teaching vocabulary, using the multiple media, by providing giving them multiple examples, by highlighting the important information, providing scaffolding and support, using flexible groupings, following the video, meet with the small group to discuss and conduct related demonstrations and provide corrective ongoing feedback. So here are some solutions to that. Now the question comes, anticipating barriers within the curriculum and material. What material would we use in order to teach the lessons? What barriers do we anticipate, and what are the solutions to those barriers? The traditional methods, they will have textbook or handouts, or audio lectures, video lectures, or images, video, or handouts. What barriers students will have? The students will They have to see the material, they have to decode, comprehend, process the visual information, be physically and cognitively able to take notes. What UDL solutions they can have? In addition to printed text, provide students information through digital text. Digital text can be manipulated easier, visual access, and can be converted to speech, and provide solution with the options using graphic organizers for note taking, and show a video with open captioning, and provide oral descriptions of the images. So these are some anticipated barriers and their solutions. Now, what connects these concepts? What connects these concepts? Now we have seen the both aspect, how vacation planning and UDL lesson planning are similar. I would like to take you to the note page, and I want you to open Make Connection. Now let's think about it. Let's think about your past vacation. Step one, what things worked well? Step 2, what things did not work well? And what would you do differently or proactively plan? Now, this is, you can use the sticky note or you can use the text box. And you can answer your responses here. After completing this, you will click this arrow and go to the next one. And now you will add, by using either sticky note or text box, what connects these concepts. Is vacation planning similar to UDL lesson planning? Do we need to anticipate barriers proactively? Do we need to have solutions, think about the solutions to those barriers proactively? After completing these activities, you can go back to the presentation. Now, here is the choice board. It has multiple choices and flexibility. Uh, so you can create on your own leisure. You can write, you can draw, you can act. So here is your exit ticket for this presentation. And here are the references. If you want to learn more about this presentation, you can click on in order to learn more about, and these references has been used to create this presentation. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. Here I have my district email, mamta.verma@brazilsportisd.net, and I have my personal email, mamtaverma10@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you. Have a blessed summer break.